Hello and welcome. Today I'm speaking to Gary Taubes, one of our keynote speakers at the Ancestral Health Symposium in Amsterdam on June 11. Gary Taubes is an investigative science and health journalist, and he's the author of The Case for Keto, which you can see behind me, The Case Against Sugar, Why We Get Fat, and Good Calories, Bad Calories. Welcome, Gary Taubes.
Okay. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah.
I look forward to the symposium.
Yeah, and well, your lecture has a very catching title. The history of a very bad idea, energy balance, fat shaming, and the failed science of obesity. And that certainly raises my curiosity. Perhaps you could give us a short preview of what we can expect from your presentation.
Okay, so it's a pretty simple concept we're working with here. If you ask anyone on the street what's the cause of obesity, or if they, why they personally get fat, if they're struggling with weight, the obvious answer is you eat too much. Okay, you overeat. In the technical literature, the idea is obesity is an energy balance disorder. So you're taking more calories than you expend, and it seems so intuitively obvious that nobody ever really questions it. And by nobody, I mean effectively nobody. As an investigative journalist who got into this business 20 years ago, one of the lessons I learned in the history and the science was how important it was to look at the history. If you've got an idea, so if you're in physics, for instance, when you learn physics, you learn about Newton's gravity, and you learn about Maxwell's equations, and you learn about Einstein's theory of relativity, and you learn about the experiments that test these theories and why we believe them. In obesity and nutrition, that kind of, and medicine in general, that kind of history is never taught. But as a journalist, I wanted to understand where this idea came from. And as you start going back into the research, into the history, into the journals, I learned that obesity was, until the 1930s, there were two competing hypotheses of obesity. One was that it was a hormonal disorder. Okay, basically, there was a great line in Bertram Russell play, where one of the characters says, it's obesity, it's constitutional. Some of us get fat no matter how little we eat. And so this was sort of the general idea. Some people are predisposed to gain weight easily, some people aren't. And then the idea is something in the diet or something in the environment triggers that predisposition. And this hypothesis actually vanished in the 1930s. A researcher at the University of Michigan claimed to have disproven it based on what in retrospect was completely inadequate evidence. And what's interesting is from the 1930s onward, as scientists created animal models of obesity, all the animal models confirmed this hormonal explanation. But by the 1960s, if anyone who said obesity was hormonal, that was considered an excuse for why fat people didn't have to do what thin people do naturally, which is eat in moderation and maybe exercise. So this idea that obesity is caused by eating too much or that it's an energy balance disorder is at the heart of virtually all thinking in common chronic diseases. Obesity, of course, diabetes, heart disease, everywhere in nutrition. And it seems to be based on just a misconception. And because of this misconception, we've ignored the sort of hormonal enzymatic regulation of fat tissue and what that tells us about why people get fat. So that's the issue that I'm discussing throughout. And I'm going to present it in a historical basis so people can see how these ideas evolved, how we came to believe this concept that all it takes to get fat is to eat too much, and the damage that concept has done, the fat shaming that goes with it, and try to see bring back the idea that our fat accumulation is regulated hormonally very profoundly, just like everything else in our body. And in order to accumulate excess fat, that has to be dysregulated.
Yeah, exactly. Wow, this is going to be a really useful presentation for our audience. We have a very mixed audience, from people who are just very enthusiastic followers of a ketogenic diet to doctors and dietitians as well. What do you hope people will get from your lecture when they go home? What will they remember?
Well, I always like people to understand. I mean, when I write my books and I give my lectures, I'm basically replicating my process of understanding. So if we're going to believe something about, a concept as fundamental as weight regulation, I want people to understand where that belief system came from and what the implications are. Because if you understand correctly the cause of excess fat accumulation of obesity, then you understand, then the methods of treatment are pretty obvious. For the past, most of us hear all the time, if we're gaining weight, that we just have to eat less and exercise. And most of us who find our way into the keto paleo world are people for whom that advice did not work. And so this will help everyone understand why we believe something that was inherently so foolish, and why what we're doing now seems to work, and why it may be the only thing to do that will keep us healthy.
Well, we have many more great speakers on that day. We also have Professor Noakes, who won't be there live, unfortunately, but he was speaking to us from the screen. We have Dr. Eric Westman, Amy Burger, Frits Muskiet, a Dutch professor, and Dr. Ivo Sijpkens. So we have a very informative day for everybody there. Well, there are still tickets available. So if people watching now thinking, wow, I need to be there, I want to meet Gary Taubes, I want to see what he says, I want to hear all the other speakers as well, get your tickets. I'll put the link down in the show notes. And we're looking very much forward to hearing you speak on June the 11th in Amsterdam. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm really looking forward to being there.
Wonderful. We'll see you then. Thank you.